Washington's offense lived up to their top 10 ranking, thrashing the Boise State Broncos 56-19. Let's break it all down right here on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Huskies. It's Monday. Lars, we are breaking down an actual win. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. You can find all our work with Inside the Huskies at Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. Check it out at si.com/college/Washington. And you can find out everything about Washington's 56-19 thrashing. I know I said it in the opener, but it really was just a beatdown in so many different ways of Boise State. And a lot of people, we're talking on the interwebs about this being a possible upset alert for the Huskies. But before we get into all of that, I got to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get 200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And speaking of getting started, Lars, I think we just need to jump right into it here. Michael Penix, 19 of 40, 73% completion percentage, 450 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he could have had more, like a lot more.
Yeah, it's really crazy because I went back and watched the game after I got home, watched most of the clip, the in-30 version of it, if you will, because I didn't want to see every single play. But it really was crazy how they could have easily had 65-70. If you take 2 or 3 different plays, ultimately they still end up scoring on pretty much every single one that they were close on. I mean, the J-Mac touchdown at the very end that he didn't get on, Dylan Johnson punches it in. So maybe it's a little skewed as to who would get the touchdown. But yeah, flat out. I mean, this was after those first 2 drives, that Ryan Grubb wanted to keep things creative and keep things interesting for a little bit, and get the TV audience to kind of be like, oh wow, this might be a close game. This might be a close game. Hey, let's tune in here. No, okay, see you guys, we're out. Like we just wanted you guys to show up first. I think that's really what that seemed like to me watching that thing back, because man, I mean, we knew this offense was going to be special. We knew the defense just needed to hold its job, and really, actually, the special teams set the tone from the beginning of the play with Jeremy Bernard. Getting that. Go for it.
I see. I didn't want to just talk about that one. I know we're talking about the offense here, but I got to give 10 seconds to give some love to Maurice Himes, who just ran through a blocker and just basically threw the blocker into, I can't remember who the ball carrier was, but tackled both of them on the same play on one of those kick coverage. And it was just one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Like, everybody remembers the Penix like gif of him going like just, oh wow, like I think it was Davon Banks' hit against Michigan State last year. Like, this one was more impressive than that one. And I know we'll talk about Davon Banks more later, but we have to talk about Jalen McMillan, because he was incredible. 119 total yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 receiving, 1 rushing out of the Wildcat, and he completed his first career college pass. He did throw one a couple years ago, but he got his first career completion on a little 9-yard, I think he threw to Jack Westover, but it was, he did a little bit of everything, and it was incredible to watch.
Yeah, well, you know what that trick play tells me? That's coming again at some point this season, because you don't do a double pass just for a 10-yard gain. But Jalen hiked that ball in there. That was coming in like a missile. That he was not missing on that one. He was not lofting it and hoping that it'd just be a nice soft pass. Oh, he made sure Jack caught that. And then it actually made me go back and look at his stats. First completed pass for Jalen since 2018. Wow. When he was a junior at San Joaquin Memorial High School in Fresno, California. So it goes back a ways. And coincidentally, since we're on the subject here, the last season that Jalen McMillan had a rushing touchdown, same year, 2018. Hey. So, I mean, because we have to go back to 21 when he threw it at Washington, and we have to go back 21 again when he did some other run plays. And it's kind of ironic to see how the last staff struggled so hard to find ways to get guys creative and use guys in creative ways. But they knew that Jalen was one of those creative guys. They just had no coach competent enough to figure it out. Now you have one of the best coaches in the country figuring it out for you. And that's exactly what it looks like on Saturdays.
No, that's absolutely right. And as great as Jalen McMillan was, we still need to give love to everybody else in the room. Denzel Boston he was on the field a lot. He just didn't really have any targets, but he still looked really good. Jeremy Bernard was excellent as he normally is. Ja'Lynn Polk, obviously, we talked, just made the play of the day when Penix just threw what Kalen DeBoer called a thing of beauty when he hit him in stride down the left sideline for a 50-yard pickup. And then Rome Odunze, 7 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown. And the one thing that everybody asked him during the spring through fall camp was, is he going to make contested catches? Is he going to be more physical? And the answer is yes. He just went up on that fade route for the touchdown, and he was as physical as you could be.
Yeah, I mean, that was we all know Rome's not going to go down cheap. I mean, he said as much last season where he said, I'm not going to go down for free. And he lived up to it again this season, to your point. I mean, I think one of us made a prediction about Rome that would go for 10 and 120 and a couple of touchdowns. So I was a little close on that. Just had to get that.
Yeah, I was going to say you had to get that in there.
We're gonna move past that. But to the point, the reason why I thought that Rome would have such a good day was just because we'd seen in the fall camp where, again, all the defensive backs who were making contested plays, the receivers were just better. They were just plucking the balls out. Jalen was plucking the balls out. Jalen Polk was plucking the balls out. But Rome especially, I mean, there was a couple of times where he was going in between there were 3, 4, 5 guys gang tackling him down to the 5-yard line on the far side when he made that one catch. So it's a testament to Rome. It's a testament to all these guys, because there's a difference between having a really, really good scheme and, just scheming guys open, and maybe the receivers aren't necessarily that good, but the coach is that good, and you're just kind of getting guys open and things like that. And then there's dudes that get themselves open. And Rome and these guys are guys that just get themselves open. They just happen to have Ryan Grubb at the helm. Or not at the helm. Sorry, Kalen. At the controls. Kalen at the helm, Ryan at the controls.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, we can't knock anything that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer are doing, but it helps when you have the best receiver group in the country, as Robert Griffin III called them yesterday. Real quick here before we wrap up, we need to talk about the offensive line really fast, because we'll each take one person, and I will let you start. I will give you Parker Brailsford, who was far and away the most impressive lineman for the Huskies yesterday.
Yeah, that's actually what I was watching and what I wrote up on SI. You can go check it out about the fluid offensive line on Inside the Huskies. That was kind of one of the things that I wanted to see. How is this group going to do? Because last season, the offensive line, again, yes, Penix cooked. The receivers killed it. But none of that happens if you cannot protect Michael Penix, because at Indiana, we saw what happens when you don't protect Michael Penix, or when he has to improvise more and kind of have to do more. Yesterday was the first litmus test for this offensive line to say, hey, are you guys going to be anywhere close to what last season was? Because you have the 2 bookend tackles. We know that. But Parker Brailsford getting his first start and not getting taken out until almost late in the second quarter was big for me, because he was not losing any of his battles. He was not losing any of his matchups. They were rotating guys in at left guard a couple of times. And then when Parker did come out, Garen Hatchett came in, and Garen did well. Did well. But I think we can see why they put Parker as the number 1 offensive lineman coming out of fall camp, just because I didn't have to look at the right side of that line.
No, not at all.
I was looking at it, but everything you could kind of see, either he had a clean pocket, or maybe there was a little bit of push on the left side, but the right side would hold up, and that's what changed the game. Because once they made the change at left guard, they still wound up rotating those guys back and forth, so it wasn't like a permanent switch. But that line, those 5 really seemed to start to set the tone with Julius at left guard and Parker at right guard, because I'm sure you're going to talk about the other one. But Parker kind of, again, this goes back to Roger Rosengard being at right tackle. Penix's blind side is the key here. So that's your left guard, that's your left tackle, just on the right side of the line. So I think that even actually, the more you think about it, the more it speaks to how impressive Parker was just to win that job, and then to not get taken out as much as the other guys did, because he played, I believe, was it 62 total snaps? Less than Michael Penix.
Oh.
More than Michael Penix, more than Jalen McMillan, more than any offensive lineman.
Impressive.
So, I mean, not named the 2 bookend starters. Sure. But that kind of goes without saying. But again, Parker lived up to the billing.
No, he absolutely did. And real quick here, Julius Buelow was the 2nd highest graded offensive lineman by Pro Football Focus, and was just really impressive throughout the day. I remember there was one play, I think it was his first drive in, when they're coming down the field, and I just remember, like, okay, let me just let me see what Julius Buelow is gonna do on this play. And it was on that pass play to Rome that you talked about a little bit earlier, where he just had to drag 4 or 5 guys down inside the red zone. And it's like, oh, I want to see what he does in one-on-one pass protection. He was really solid. He just had a really solid all-around day and outplayed Nate Kalepo, who was the starter coming into the day. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a switch made this week. There's still going to be that or on the depth chart, but I wouldn't be surprised if Julius gets the first reps this time. And now I got to take a minute here to remind everybody about Athletic Brewing. It's now time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Jalen McMillan, who scored 3 total touchdowns, did a little bit of everything on the field, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beer that actually tastes good. Their brews are great tasting and award-winning and beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They're also constantly releasing limited edition experimental styles to add to their variety. And, one of the best things about it is they're fit for all times. You can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity even more enjoyable, like watching a big game or your kid's game, tackling work or working out, or, just hanging out on the couch after a long day. You can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewingcompany.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKDOWN to get 15% off your first order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout, 15% off at athleticbrewingcompany.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Moving right along here, it's time to talk about the defense, because there was some good, there was some bad, and there was some outstanding. There was a little bit of everything. And I think, do you want to go from top to bottom, start with the outstanding, or go from bottom up and start with the bad and go from there?
No, let's go top down, because I think we already know who the bad is.
I wasn't going to go that far, but I did want to talk about Davon Banks, because Davon Banks was just out of this world. And he's somebody who we've highlighted on the show in previous weeks, talked about just a lot of just the good that he's done throughout fall camp. Kalen DeBoer had some really high praise for him after yesterday's game. And it was just really impressive to see everything that he did on the field. And he recorded 4 pass breakups. And I saw an interesting stat. I can't remember who put it out yesterday, but I did also use it. It's something that you can find at Inside the Huskies, which is his 4 pass breakups in yesterday's game, as we record this on Sunday, would have tied him for the team lead throughout last season. Dom Hampton and Tuli Asanoa both had 4 throughout the year, and he had 4 yesterday alone.
I'm just still in awe of that fact. I don't, to your point, I don't know who put that out there, but that is incredible. But to that point, what is one thing that also last season didn't happen after the first game? Turnovers.
Yep.
So I want to actually go to Cameron Fabikilanen, only because actually he wound up being one of the top 5 graded defenders by PFF after the game. So there is legitimacy here. Also, because
when PFF fits your narrative.
You love that, but also to be fair, when you go back and watch that play, he did exactly what he was supposed to do as the high safety: sit back, watch, read, and react. And he bit perfectly at the right time, and then jumped at the right time. And I think we haven't seen that K-Fab come in years. I mean, he was a former 4-star recruit. That's what you wanted to see from him, but it just never really fully materialized. And really, I think he had one of his, if not his best game of his career yesterday. And I think that will kind of lay the foundation, because that's what Chuck Morrell said coming into the week, was that Fabikilanen was really actually standing out. And we're like, wait a minute, we sure about that? Because we hadn't seen much of him, especially in spring. And we did in fall camp, and it was kind of with the 2s. And it was like, all right, is this guy really going to live up to it? And he just showed out on Saturday. And I think that's going to also, similar to your point about Julius on the offense, I'm not necessarily sure he's going to beat out Michelle Powell, but I think he's certainly going to get more playing time, and they also could use him next to Asa at the other safety. So I think there's a number of different things they can do with him, and especially when you're forcing turnovers. Again, now, yes, you kind of got to put a little caveat there as redshirt sophomore quarterback, inexperienced, the first time at a big stadium, things like that. But it still comes down to making the plays and when they count, and K-Fab did that. So I think I'll be curious to see what his role is going to be next week and moving forward, because I would imagine, anytime – they didn't have a ton of turnovers yesterday. I mean, Carson Bruner got one and K-Fab got the other. Believe me, I think those are the only 2 interceptions for us yesterday, right?
Yep, no, that's correct.
And so, last season, Asa had 2 on his own. Davon Banks probably could have had one or two if he turned one of those PBUs into an interception. But at least he's able to make the play. And I think K-Fab is one of those guys where, okay, if he's going to be doing PBUs, I need to be forcing turnovers. Carson just got a gift.
That one was a gift. And I want to keep moving forward here. I want to talk about the good, but real quick, I got to remind everybody about Locked On College Football Live. College football season is here, and this season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel, so you can find it right here on Locked On Huskies. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. And, the one good thing that I really wanted to talk about, because there are others, but I know there are going to be other ways that we can work it in, is I want to talk about Jabbar Muhammad, because Jabbar Muhammad, and this is going to sound like a stretch, but bear with me for a minute. He kind of reminded me of what prime Richard Sherman did for a while. So again, bear with me. I understand what I just said, where you just kind of didn't really look to his side of the field a lot of the day. Because I'm not comparing the two in any way, but it was just kind of like, oh, they're just not throwing at Jabbar's side of the field. And yeah, something needs to be said about, Elijah Jackson, who did struggle and picked up a couple of pass interference penalties. But Jabbar Muhammad was just kind of insanely solid throughout the day. He didn't record a PBU. He didn't he only recorded one tackle. Excuse me, he did record one PBU. But he only recorded one tackle. And it was just kind of like, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot going on his side of the field, which is exactly what this team needed. He did exactly what was asked of him, which is just play lockdown coverage. Not a lot of targets are going to be coming his way. And I was just really impressed by what he was able to do.
4 targets, 1 catch, 5 yards.
Perfect.
You can't ask for much more.
No, not at all.
To your point, you honestly don't want your cornerbacks being thrown at 10, 20 times, 10 times a game, because that shows, hang on, wait, they're targeting this guy for a reason. Why do we have to put more guys over there? To your point, it's like, okay, we talked about this coming into the season. Yeah, and to your point, that's kind of where, you bring in Jabbar to lock down that side of the field, and kind of everything is supposed to solidify from there. But when it doesn't solidify, where the problems are to address, and Jabbar can still just hang on his side of the field. I think that is going to bring peace of mind to the defensive staff moving forward.
I totally agree. And so the one thing we kind of have to hit on here, because there are some things we'll talk about, because I kind of want to stick on the defense in the third segment. But there's one thing we definitely need to talk about on the offensive side. But the real question is, should Davon Banks start against Tulsa?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't hear, my view on this is Elijah should be able to win it back, similar to how Davon won it, or right. is winning it back. I don't think, because again, I think this goes back to the point about Muhammad. Just leave that side of the field alone. Just leave Jabbar over there and let Thaddeus and Davon and everybody else figure out the right side quarterback. And also, again, this is not the problem that Washington has had traditionally on defense, because you had a really, really good defensive back coach who just got locked down cornerbacks, and that just hasn't been the case.
And you couldn't have said it. I can't say it any better myself. So time to just move on here. And, I think that it's solid to say that betting on Davon Banks was a good bet from the UW coaching staff this week. Mm-hmm. Just like betting with FanDuel is always a great option. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right, moving right along here to the segment that nobody wants to talk about, but you have to, especially since this team is ranked in the top 10. there are concerns. This is not a perfect team. And we saw that yesterday in a couple of different instances. So I kind of wanted to go first here because I want to talk about the lack of a pass rush, because that's something, and it's something that we discussed after the game yesterday. I remember saying to you, save this for the podcast. Let's wait till tomorrow and we can hatch some of this out then. So one of the biggest things was there was only one sack, and it came from Edifon Ulofoshio. He made a nice play. He was able to wrap Taylen Green up. And yeah, maybe, there's something to be said for the mobile quarterbacks, but there was pressure, and they did a good job of containing Taylen Green for the most part, because let me check my notes really quickly here. He wasn't necessarily as effective on the ground as some people thought he was going to be. And I know we were among the crowd that said, oh, this is going to be an issue. He ran for 31 yards, which, it's fine. Could have been better, could have been worse. But there was only one sack. And yeah, he was under pressure. The completion percentage was low, kept it under 50%. But it's just this pass rush recorded 37 sacks last year. And yesterday, they didn't look like a pass rush that can record 37 sacks again this year.
I got a question for you off that point. Where was Zion yesterday? I love the kid, but like that's kind of like, if Braylon's not able to do it, Roy was probably your second. We talked about this. Was probably your second best pass rushing defensive lineman. I was thinking there'd be a little bit more out of Zion, but maybe that's just kind of how the scheme works. I don't know.
I got to interject. I got to say that I was personally very impressed, because one thing that Zion talked about throughout spring and throughout the fall was his commitment to stopping the run. And one thing that I looked for yesterday was watching him set the edge, and he did a fantastic job of that. And I know it's something that we've said on this podcast before. When it comes to playing against the run, you either want it or you don't. And yesterday he did. So I was really impressed by that. And I think that's something where when you focus on that a little bit too much, especially when one thing that, it could be scheme related to, and this is just me, just throwing things out there as possibilities, is he could have been asked to play a lot of contain, which is force him to step up, which is fine. And if that's what you need to do, great. That's okay. And you're doing your job. And one thing that I know you want to talk about personally was Braylon Trice.
Yeah, and because that's the thing. I mean, Braylon, we're talking about, being probably a first round pick, one of the top defensive edges in the conference, if not the country. He just wasn't able to close the gap. And now again, there was a lot of that time last year too, where he was almost there. He would get a half sack on Bo Nix, or he would almost get there against Quinn Ewers a couple of times. And I think that's the difference for me, to where it's not going to matter against a team like Boise State. So I'm not knocking Braylon for that. But I think when it comes to these bigger games, those are the moments where you have to close out, or at the very least be always getting pressure and forcing decisions. And actually at times that's what we saw. I mean, on third down a couple of times, we saw Braylon wasn't able to get home, but there's still a bit of force, the incomplete pass. And so if you're not getting sacks, you're at least doing enough to get a positive result for your team overall. And now, I still think those sacks have to come, though.
No, you're right. But I think that that's something that he did do yesterday, because it's something that I know I pointed out to you after the game. I think I pointed out during the game as well, where he was consistently lining up with Boise State's offense was consistently putting a tight end on his side, forcing him. And I noticed it a couple of times where he would line up in his stance and then take an extra step or two out, because he knew that the chip was coming, which was really smart to kind of get further outside, but it creates a longer path to the quarterback. And that's something that I think is not going to be unique this year. So yes, the sacks still need to come. You're right. But if he's going to see that chip, and then because he still on multiple times was still able to get around the tackle, he used that speed. He's got great power. We know this, but I think that there's still just, it's something to figure out, where last year it was, Jeremiah Martin, who was excellent last year in his own right, picked up 8.5 sacks. Was also just somebody that tackles knew they needed to contend with. Same with Zion Tupuola-Fatui. And if Braylon is going to get all this extra attention this year, especially because, he's a preseason first-team All-American, so it's going to come, it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment to just kind of say, oh, these are how guys are going to play me now. Okay, how am I going to counter? So I think that's something that I want to keep a really close eye on in the Tulsa game this coming week.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and to your point, also one thing UW did last year, aside from mixing up the line in terms of just where they put guys, was also the stunts and how they were using guys. That I think we saw a little bit of that yesterday, we'll probably see more of that again, because you don't want to give away your entire playbook, both offensive or defensive, in the first game. So I think there's probably some things that yesterday was kind of like, to your point, a learning curve for Braylon, where it's like, okay, I don't need to go off for 5 sacks in this game. I could, right?
Sure.
If you want to, more power to you. But I think it's better for him to say, okay, how do I approach this? How do I, give me like a game and a half to get going? Because he's a guy, when he gets going, it's off. He's gone. No chance. You're not catching him. So I think it's actually, to your point, better for him to learn this way. And again, because I wasn't like necessarily thinking, okay, wow, oh my God, he's having a terrible game because he doesn't have any sacks. But it's one of those where it's like, okay, if you're kind of riding that fine line between, well, okay, you're containing the quarterback, he's not running a ton, you're not losing, so this isn't a bad thing. But also, we talked about it going into this game. You got to, style points matter. The offense showed that style points matter yesterday with Dylan Morris connecting with Josh Cravens for a touchdown. So I think that also applies to the defense where, hey, I mean, we saw in the Apple Cup last year where Maurice Hines gets a sack, Javon Parker gets a sack in the second half. It's like, who cares? It's the second half. It's like, yeah, but these guys need this moving forward to where they,
for sure.
Hey, I had a sack as a freshman. I had a sack as a sophomore. So that way next year, 3 or 4 sacks, 4 or 5 sacks. So you're always wanting to raise the bar. I think this was more of a bar setter. This opener was a bar setter rather than a tone setter.
I get that. I think that's fair. I like that a lot. So real quickly here, before we get out of here, we have to talk about the run game, because for the most part, outside of Will Nixon, who showed some great bursts yesterday, the run game was not what we kind of expected it to be. And I think that, Ryan Grobe clearly adjusted and said, oh, they're selling out to stop the run. All right, we're just going to throw it over their heads every single time, which worked. But is that something where, do you think teams are going to continue to try to sell out and stop the run and force the Huskies to be a one-dimensional passing offense, which still is a bad idea? Or do you think that this is something that going forward we might see, teams just play against a lighter box and say, we saw you try to run the ball and not do it very effectively. We dare you to beat us on the ground.
Yeah, that's exactly my thing. I'm almost expecting teams to do the opposite, to where you're selling out to stop the pass. Not totally what Jimmy Lake used to do at Washington State with Mike Leach in the air raid, where he rush 3, drop 8, because again, Washington's scheme is a little bit different. But that's kind of where you bait Washington and saying, are you going to take the underneath routes, or are you going to try and shoot deep and we can get a turnover, or are you going to try and then run the ball? And I think that would be where Ryan Grubb would take advantage of Ryan running the ball, because he's got a couple of backs that, to your point, can get 5 to 7 yards per carry if they really, really want to. So I think it'll be interesting to see, for me, how does that dynamic change? Because again, we know what the passing offense can do. And at some point, teams are going to start to back up more and more and say, okay, let's not get, you can beat us nickeling and diming us, but Ja'Lynn Polk's not going to beat us for 44 over the top. Odunze is not going to beat us for 50 over the top. McMillan is not going to go for 75 over the top. So I think at some point teams are going to have to flip that script.
I thought it was really great that Will Nixon, and we all know what play he was talking about. He didn't want to say specifically, but it's pretty obvious when you go and rewatch the game, is he said it himself, like, oh, there was one play where I should have had a 50-yard rushing touchdown, and I made a mistake, and my offensive line blocked it really well for me, and I missed my hole. And yeah, so there was I think I just want to say that there was money left on the table when it comes to what we saw on the ground. So I don't think I'm concerned going forward, but if this is still an issue, like say after the Michigan State game, or they're not running the ball effectively, I think that's where we might want to start having questions and say, oh, what's going on here? Lars, as always, I want to thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate you coming on here. We have a lot of fun. And now that there's actual football to talk about every week, I know that this is just going to continue to be a great show to follow along, which is what all of you out there should do, where you can check out all our work at Inside the Huskies at si.com/college/Washington. Make sure you tune in all week. Like, comment, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review here on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you are seeing our faces or hearing our voices right now. There's probably a way to show us your appreciation for this podcast, because we truly do hope you enjoy it. We work really hard to make sure that everything on here is great. So with that being said, we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see where the Huskies are ranked by the time you talk to us on Tuesday.